Prior to 2017, the city of Strongsville in Ohio was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and nothing truly terrible ever happened. At least, that's what the residents wanted to believe. But all of that changed in 2017 when the Pleskovic family began noticing strange things happening in their home. They would come home to find doors left open or small items missing from their living room. And sometimes, late at night, they had a sense they were being watched. The family tried to dismiss these unsettling occurrences as coincidences or perhaps a sign of their own forgetfulness. After all, in a town like Strongsville, where crime was practically unheard of, it was easier to believe that nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Strongsville lies in the heart of suburban America. It's a town known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbours, and a sense of safety that makes it an ideal place to raise a family. It's the kind of place where people don't bother locking their doors and everyone knows their neighbours. For Melinda and Bruce Pleskovic, Strongsville was the perfect setting to build their lives and raise their 3 children, Anna, Megan, and Kyle. Their youngest son, Kyle, was born with Down syndrome and was non-verbal. While some families might have struggled to care for a child with different needs, Melinda excelled at it. She was more than just a mother to Kyle. She was his anchor. She was his anchor in a world that often overlooked those with different abilities. She poured her heart into making sure Kyle had a fulfilling life, filled with love and opportunities. She was deeply involved with local organisations supporting children with special needs, and was a passionate volunteer with the Special Olympics, where she found joy in helping athletes like Kyle shine. But Melinda's kindness wasn't confined to her own family. She was also a dedicated middle school teacher and a second mother to countless students over her nearly 30 years of teaching. Her commitment extended beyond the classroom, and she was a beloved softball coach, cheering students on and teaching them valuable life lessons along the way. Her daughter Megan shared her love for sports, especially soccer, and the two spent countless hours travelling from practices to games and tournaments across the state. Melinda was one of those mums who was always on the sidelines, cheering for her kids, and she had no shortage of friendly banter to offer the opposing team. She had a magnetic personality and a warm smile with a heart as big as her laugh. With all you now know about Melinda, it will come as no surprise that when her eldest daughter Anna and her fiancé Jeffrey needed a place to stay in 2017, she didn't hesitate to open her home to them. Anna and Jeffrey were just 20 years old and first-time parents to a busy 1-year-old. On top of that, they were also planning a wedding and trying to save up for their own home. It's safe to say that life was busy for them both. But despite everything that was going on for them, friends of the young couple remember that they were happy and that Jeffrey treated Anna and their child like they were the centre of his world. Melinda and Bruce were very supportive of the couple, having been young parents themselves, so they offered the converted basement of their home to Anna and Jeffrey at no charge. They told them they could stay as long as they needed, so long as they saved their money towards a home of their own. Their generosity extended beyond simply putting a roof over the young family's heads, when they also offered to pay for most of the upcoming wedding. The only exception was that Jeffrey would need to pay for the venue and organise his family's half of the invitations. On the surface, life seemed picture perfect for Bruce and Melinda. They were doting on their beautiful new granddaughter, eagerly preparing for a wedding just around the corner, and generally enjoying what seemed to be a happy, fulfilling life. But like any family, there were underlying issues simmering beneath the surface. Now, none of Bruce or Melinda's problems appear to be anything major like what we hear about in so many stories. There was no infidelity, no drinking problems, no violence, and no financial skeletons in the closet. It seems that the biggest issues the Pleskovic family had came from a source completely outside of their own family. See, while Bruce and Melinda were very involved in their granddaughter's life and financially supporting Anna to get married, the same couldn't be said about her fiancé's family. Jeffrey confided that his parents had little interest in the wedding preparations. In fact, he told his in-laws that they didn't want to be involved in the wedding at all. The reason? Well, apparently, his father didn't care much for Melinda. Jeffrey's comment caught Bruce and Melinda completely off guard. It just didn't make sense. Melinda had only met Jeffrey's parents a few times, and each of those encounters had been uneventful, with no hint of conflict or tension. Melinda was known for her kind and warm-hearted nature. She was the type of person who could strike up a friendly conversation with just about anyone. So it was hard for them to comprehend why Jeffrey's father seemed to have such a negative opinion of her. Bruce and Melinda had made several attempts to bridge this uncomfortable gap, even if just to make peace for their kid's special day. They invited Jeff's parents over on several occasions in a genuine effort to connect and to get to know his parents better. But every single time, Jeff told them his parents declined the invitation without any reason. They were determined to try one last time, and they organised a special dinner party just 2 weeks before the wedding. But just like every other time, Jeffrey's parents declined to attend, and they offered no reason for their refusal. The rejection was bitterly disappointing for Melinda, and she constantly apologised to Anna for not being able to make things right between their families. Beyond the drama with the in-laws, the Pleskovic family were also facing a much more alarming problem. They seemed to have become the target of a stalker. For months, their home had been the target of a string of break-ins and unnerving incidents which left the family on edge. It all began with reports of a suspicious person hanging around their property. Each time they noticed someone lurking, the Pleskovics would call the police. But by the time law enforcement arrived, whoever it was had vanished without a trace. On one particularly eerie night, Jeffrey saw multiple masked men standing in the backyard. He quickly called for Anna, but by the time she got there, the figures had already disappeared into the darkness. In another unsettling encounter, Anna spotted someone trying to force their way into the house. She cautiously peeked through the curtains and found herself face to face with a dark, hooded figure who was pressed right up against the window. She screamed, and Melinda came rushing down the stairs, but once again, the intruder had vanished before anyone could do anything. Things escalated when items started disappearing from the house. Cash would go missing, Bruce's laptop disappeared, and one of their car keys mysteriously vanished. Not long after the keys to Melinda's car went missing, the harassment took on a more psychological edge. One night, the intruder waited outside until all the lights in the house were off, then set off the car alarm. When Bruce pushed the button on the spare key to disable the alarm, the person set it off again and again and again. It was clear the person or people were taunting the family. Melinda took to Facebook to post about the alarm incident. Quote, "Whoever has stolen my keys was playing with the remote at 4:30 a.m. and kept starting the van at 7. End quote. In another post, she said someone had put nails into the tyres of Bruce's vehicle. Beyond the strangeness of the incidents themselves, the most concerning part was that whoever had access to the keys could simply have stolen the vehicle. The fact they decided instead to taunt and play games with the Pleskovics indicated that they weren't in it for the money. Whoever was behind these disturbances wanted the family to live in fear. They wanted Melinda, Bruce, and their children to lie awake at night, hearts pounding, dreading about what might happen next, and wondering if these psychological attacks would turn into something far more dangerous. Melinda and Bruce felt completely helpless, knowing they were at the mercy of this twisted person until things took a darker turn. Unfortunately, they didn't have to wait long for that escalation. Just days after Melinda vented her frustrations about the car alarm incidents on Facebook, Melinda was dead. October 2017 marked the month of Anna and Jeffrey's wedding, but it was about to be a month they remembered for something far more tragic. The date was set for Saturday the 28th, and the arrangements were coming together nicely. Then, on the Monday of the week of the wedding, Jeffrey told his in-laws that his mother had decided they all should put their differences aside. She offered to take Bruce and Melinda and the kids out for a family dinner. This was a huge deal to the couple, as they had been turned down at every previous opportunity. To make things even better, Jeffrey's mum had also said she was going to pay Bruce and Melinda back a portion of what they had paid for the wedding as a symbol of good faith and their families coming together. Melinda and Bruce had no expectation for the money, and they had contributed not out of a sense of duty, but out of genuine excitement for this next stage of their daughter's life. But they weren't about to turn the money down and give Jeff's parents another reason to dislike them. Melinda and Bruce had made a ritual out of meeting for dinner after work every night. It gave them a chance to connect as a couple, and it also gave Jeff and Anna some space in the evening. Each day, the couple would text each other while they were both at work to decide on where to eat that night. When Jeffrey's mother suggested going out for dinner, they didn't think twice about cancelling their plans and meeting with her instead. That morning, everyone went off to work and school as usual. But partway through the day, Jeffrey texted the family to let them know that his mother no longer wanted to meet with the whole family, just Melinda. It was odd, but Melinda thought she might have been feeling that a smaller group would be better. But then Jeffrey said that his mother wanted to cancel the dinner altogether. Yet again, there was no explanation for the change of plans. Melinda felt that same familiar sense of disappointment, but she wasn't going to let it ruin the excitement she felt for her daughter's wedding in just 5 days' time. With the dinner cancelled, she messaged Bruce to tell him to meet her at a restaurant named Brew Kettle. When Bruce clocked out from work that evening, he went straight to the restaurant, but Melinda wasn't there, even though she usually finished work earlier than him. He didn't think much of it, as she sometimes got caught up talking to students or parents. When she hadn't turned up after half an hour, he texted her to say he was going to the gym for a bit and that when she was ready, he would come back for dinner. But just as he was walking out the door, Anna texted him to say she was working a shift at Applebee's restaurant and did they want to come and meet with her and the baby for dinner. Bruce thought it was a nice idea and he texted Melinda to meet him at Applebee's instead. By 7 p.m, he was sitting at the table across from Jeffrey and his granddaughter. By then, Jeffrey had already had a couple of drinks while Anna was serving meals to other diners. The men got to chatting when the topic of Melinda came up. Bruce realised he still hadn't heard back from her since she suggested the restaurant earlier in the day. So he grabbed his phone and tried to call her, but there was no answer. That's when Jeffrey revealed he had been locked out of the house earlier that day because the door had been deadbolted from the inside. This comment got Bruce's heart racing. With everything that had been going on recently at the house, he wanted to see Melinda ASAP to make sure she was okay. So he asked Anna for his meal to go and walked out the restaurant towards his car. But right before he got inside, Jeffrey asked Bruce for a quick favour. He said he had brought a gallon of gasoline in a can from his dad's house, and he needed to pour it into his tank. Jeffrey asked Bruce to watch the baby for a second while he filled his vehicle. Bruce was anxious to get home, but he was also an obliging kind of guy, so he patiently waited while Jeffrey got the gas can out and started to fill his tank up. Time ticked away, and while Bruce watched his granddaughter, a thought niggled at the back of his mind. The whole afternoon up until that point had been a little bit strange. It seemed as though someone or something was constantly trying to derail his day. He had been sent to meet his wife at a restaurant, and then she didn't show up. Then he was sent to Applebee's, and now here he was, waiting for his son-in-law to fill up his gas tank in a parking lot of all places. It seemed to be one of those days when nothing went right. The sense of unease that had been building all day seemed to ease slightly when Bruce and Jeffrey finally arrived outside their home. As they pulled into the driveway, Bruce immediately noticed that Melinda's car was parked in its usual spot and that every light in the house was on, and he felt a momentary wave of relief wash over him. But as they approached the front door, that feeling quickly evaporated. Jeffrey fumbled with his key, but the door wouldn't budge. The deadbolt had been locked from the inside, just like earlier that day. They rang the doorbell several times, but there was no response from inside. Minutes ticked by as the two men waited on the porch, tension mounting, until the door finally creaked open. Standing in the doorway was Bruce and Melinda's youngest son, Kyle. Kyle didn't speak as he let them inside, which wasn't unusual because he was non-verbal. But there was something different about the way Kyle was acting. Normally, he would greet his father with a bright and welcoming smile. But this time, his expression was somber, almost distant. It was odd, unsettling even, but not enough to immediately trigger alarm. That changed the moment Bruce looked beyond his son and saw inside the home. For a moment, his mind couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. There was Melinda, lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by blood, so much blood. It was everywhere, splattered across the walls, soaked into the carpet, even streaked across the ceiling. Bruce's entire world seemed to be painted in red. As Bruce stood frozen, struggling to process the nightmare in front of him, Jeffrey followed him into the house carrying the baby. It only took a second for Jeff to glimpse the horrifying scene. His face went pale and he immediately retreated, stepping back outside onto the patio to call 911. Bruce also grabbed his phone and dialed 911.
Emergency.
Strongsville, Ohio. We have people on the way already.
What's the address?
A blazing star. I think someone killed my wife.
You think someone killed your wife?
Yeah, it looks like she has stab wounds on her back. We've had people trying to break into our house all year.
Sir, I understand, sir. I need to ask you questions, okay? Are you there right now?
I just got in the door with my new son-in-law. My son was here with her.
Sir, what I want you to do is walk outside and stay in the front, okay? You said she's stabbed in the back?
Yeah, I don't want to...
Yeah, if you don't...
I
if
think
you can start CPR.
I don't think she's... Her face hit the ground and there's blood. There's a pool of blood.
Can you see if she's breathing?
No, she is not.
Do you
As
think
soon as
you
I got
can
in.
start CPR?
No.
Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go outside. Everyone in the house, go outside and wait in the front, okay?
His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher that it looked like his wife had been stabbed. As he stood there, all the months of frustration and fear over the break-ins and strange incidents boiled over, and he lashed out at the 911 dispatcher, shouting, quote, "You know we've asked people to watch our freaking area. We had people attempt to break in just this week. I don't know what's going on in this city. You people dropped the effing ball." End quote. It only took a few minutes for the police to arrive at the scene. Melinda was pronounced dead there and then, with detectives determining she had been stabbed several times. The medical examiner later confirmed at least 36 stab wounds, but that was not all. She had also been shot 3 times. The stabbing or the gunshots alone would have been enough to kill her, but whoever had done this wanted Melinda all the way dead, which told detectives this had been a crime of passion. One investigator stated it was a perfect example of overkill. The immediate anguish over Melinda's murder was only intensified by the knowledge that for months the family had been harassed and terrorized by an unknown intruder, and yet nothing had been done to stop it. It seemed logical to conclude that Melinda had been killed by the same person who had been taunting her family all this time, which begged the question of who. Who would want Melinda dead? She was the very heart of her family, the steady anchor that kept them grounded. Her students cherished her, with one even describing her as, quote, one of the most influential people I ever had the pleasure of learning from, end quote. Friends spoke of Melinda with deep affection, recalling her warmth and kindness, saying, quote, Mel represented what a bountiful life should be made of. Family, friends, health, love, happiness, and harmony, all wrapped up in one beautiful bow, end quote. And now that beautiful life had been snuffed out in one violent act. As detectives worked to uncover the truth behind Melinda's death, her grieving family was left to cope with the devastating loss of their beloved mother. On the 28th of October, the very same day that Anna and Jeffrey were supposed to celebrate their wedding, family and friends instead gathered at the St. Paul Lutheran Church to say their final goodbyes to Melinda. After the service, pallbearers, including Bruce and Jeffrey, carried her to her final resting place. Among the many heartbreaking moments of that day, Kyle's reaction to his mother's death stood out the most. At the funeral, it seemed as though he hadn't fully grasped what was happening. Those around him noticed that Kyle kept gazing out the window, as if he were waiting for someone. It wasn't until later they realized he was searching for his mum. Perhaps he was expecting her to walk through the doors at any moment, ready to greet him with one of her warm, loving smiles and a hug. Tragically, even though Kyle may not have fully understood it at that moment, he would never again feel his mother's comforting embrace. While the family mourned, detectives focused on finding someone with a personal vendetta against the Pleskovics or Melinda herself. But despite extensive digging and interviews, they couldn't find anyone who held deep resentment toward Melinda, let alone someone who hated her enough to carry out such a brutal crime. Without answers, the community were on edge, knowing that a dangerous killer was potentially walking amongst them in plain sight. And they were right to be worried. After the funeral, Bruce and his children faced the daunting task of trying to piece their lives back together. They hadn't just lost their mother, they had lost her in the most horrific way and right inside their own home. Bruce vividly recalls the anxiety that gripped him as he approached their front door for the first time after discovering Melinda's body. The last time he had walked through those doors, he had been confronted with the sight of his wife lying lifeless and bloodied on the floor. Now he had to somehow rebuild his life within those same four walls. For weeks, the trauma of Melinda's loss was so overwhelming that Bruce and his children couldn't bring themselves to sleep in separate rooms, so they huddled together in one room at night. As the family struggled to reclaim a sense of normalcy, the police were closing in on the person who had shattered their world. They had begun by interviewing those closest to Melinda, starting with everyone who lived under the same roof. During Jeffrey's interview, he told investigators about his movements on the day of the murder. He stated he had gone to his father's house and then to his aunt's before meeting Bruce for dinner at Applebee's. He said he was at his aunt's house at around 4:30 p.m, but as detectives started piecing together the timeline, they uncovered a glaring inconsistency. Jeffrey's phone records didn't match up with him being at his aunt's house at the time he claimed. Instead, he was much closer to home. This fact raised massive red flags for the investigators. When they sat down with Bruce for his first interview, they began to uncover a more complicated and unsettling picture of life inside the Pleskovic home. It wasn't quite the picture-perfect family dynamic it appeared to be from the outside. Bruce revealed that Jeffrey often instigated conflicts with him and Melinda. When Jeffrey was angry, he became confrontational, and afterward he would bombard Melinda with hostile text messages. One of his favourite insults was to call Melinda a liberal. Of course, it's not unusual for families to have their share of frustrations and arguments, especially when multiple adults are living under the same roof. But Bruce had more to share about Jeffrey's troubling behaviour. For instance, his son-in-law was not exactly known for his honesty. He had told Melinda and Bruce that he was planning to buy a house with money he supposedly received as an inheritance from his grandparents. But when they asked for any paperwork to support his claim, Jeffrey couldn't produce a single document. And Anna told them that he wasn't saving any of the money that she earned from her job either. Instead, he was spending it on whatever he wanted. Jeffrey's constant lies and emotional outbursts began to wear Melinda and Bruce down, and it led them to try and avoid Jeffrey whenever possible. But with Jeffrey living in their basement, avoiding him entirely was impossible, and the tension between them only grew. With Bruce's insights into Jeffrey's true nature, the officers knew they were onto something. They knew he lied to Bruce and Melinda, and they had an inclination that he had lied about his whereabouts on the day of Melinda's murder, which gave them enough probable cause to get a search warrant for his car. What they found inside would provide all the evidence they needed over who exactly was responsible for Melinda's murder. First, there was the blood. Investigators found traces on the passenger side door handle and more on a pair of tracksuit pants inside Jeffrey's trunk. Then there was the knife. Hidden inside the vehicle, they discovered a bloody knife which had Melinda's blood on the blade and Jeffrey's DNA on the handle. The shape and size of the knife matched the injuries on Melinda's body and confirmed that this was in fact the murder weapon. On the 31st of October, just 1 week after Melinda's brutal murder, and 3 days after Jeffrey carried her coffin to her final resting place, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. It was clear to investigators who had taken Melinda's life, but the question of why still hung in the air. Why would Jeffrey kill a woman who had opened her home to him, supported him, and treated him like family? Yes, there had been conflicts and clashes, and they might not have had the same political views, but was that enough to drive him to murder? As it turned out, the root of Jeffrey's hatred lay in the upcoming wedding. Remember how Jeffrey had assured everyone that he would cover the cost of the wedding venue while Melinda and Bruce took care of everything else? Well, when the venue tried to process payment on Jeffrey's credit card, it was declined, not once, but 14 times. Finally, the venue had reached out to Melinda and informed her that the payment needed to be made by the next day, or the family would lose their booking and the wedding would be off completely. It's understandable that Melinda was deeply upset by this news. She had been supporting Jeffrey, Anna and their child for months and covering most of the wedding expenses under the belief that Jeffrey would handle just one thing, and now it turned out he couldn't, or wouldn't, do even that. To make matters worse, Jeffrey also hadn't sent out his half of the wedding invitations either. It seemed that Jeffrey's web of lies was unravelling, and his carefully constructed mask was beginning to slip. He likely realised that it wouldn't be long before Anna saw the truth about the man she was about to marry. Investigators speculated that Melinda may have confronted Jeffrey about his failure to fulfill his promises for the wedding, and, in a fit of rage, he lashed out and killed her. Or perhaps Jeffrey feared that Melinda would expose him for the fraud he was, and he couldn't bear the thought of being unmasked, so he silenced her before she had the chance. As if the crime itself wasn't horrifying enough, Jeffrey murdered Melinda while her young granddaughter and son were inside the house. It's chilling to think of the terror Melinda must have felt in those final moments, seeing the murderous intent in the eyes of a man she had welcomed into her family and planned to see walk down the aisle with her daughter. But if what the investigators theorized was correct, then where did that leave the mystery of the stalker who had been taunting the Pleskovic family for over a year? Were they somehow involved in Jeffrey's plan? Was their presence just a strange coincidence? Or could it be that the police had the wrong man in custody? Well, as the investigation progressed, the police had obtained surveillance footage from neighbours which showed the Pleskovic home around the times when some of the reported break-ins had occurred. In one instance, Jeffrey claimed to have seen a man trying to open the sliding door. However, when detectives reviewed the footage from that time, they discovered something telling. There was no one outside the home when Jeffrey said the incident took place. So what about the times Anna or Bruce saw someone outside? Well, the footage showed that it was Jeffrey who played the part of a masked burglar himself. But it gets worse. Jeffrey had even paid drifters who were strapped for cash to terrorize his in-laws' home when he couldn't do it himself. In many ways, discovering that Jeffrey had tormented his family for an entire year before murdering Melinda makes the crime even more sinister. It proves he was not a man driven to commit a desperate act to cover his secrets, but as someone who relished in the torment of his victims, like a predator who plays with his prey before killing them. For months, Jeffrey had watched the fearful faces of his extended family as they spoke about their growing anxiety and their inability to feel secure in their own home. Rather than deter him, their fear seemed to fuel his actions and encouraged him to continue. It was clear the incidents weren't about theft or financial gain. When Jeffrey repeatedly set off Melinda's car alarm through the night or sabotaged Bruce's tyres with nails, he had nothing to gain monetarily. The only conclusion is that he derived a twisted satisfaction from the chaos and fear that he caused. If all of that wasn't bad enough, Jeffrey's parents came forward and revealed that they never said they didn't want to meet the Pleskovics or be involved in the wedding. Jeffrey's father had also never expressed any dislike for Melinda. Jeffrey had invented these lies to wound Melinda's pride. He knew she was a well-loved person and that a rejection like that would sting. And he was right. With all of this in mind, it's not a stretch to think that Melinda's murder may have been Jeffrey's endgame all along. Another twist comes in the form of that text message that Melinda supposedly sent Bruce on the day of her murder. When the message was sent, Melinda was likely already dead. It was Jeff who had sent the message, and Bruce does recall that he found it quite short and strange and not the same kind of language Melinda would use. But he put it down to her being upset about their cancelled plans with Jeffrey's mother. He would never have considered that it was his own son-in-law sending the message after having killed his wife. When the police presented Jeffrey with all of the evidence against him, he cracked almost immediately. He said he was ready to confess what really happened that night. But given Jeffrey's track record of deceit and manipulation, it's hard to take his version of events at face value. It might be best to consider his confession with a healthy dose of skepticism. Jeffrey claimed that when he came home that day, Melinda was already furious. He said they got into a heated argument and she grabbed a gun. According to his version, she returned to confront him with the weapon, and in an act of self-defense, he tried to wrestle the gun away from her. As they struggled for control, the gun accidentally went off and shot Melinda. Beyond that, Jeffrey stated that he couldn't quite recall what happened next, only that he lost control. Now watch his police interrogation, where he repeatedly laughs and downplays what he did.
I just kind of snatched it from her. She wasn't holding it tight. Grabbed it when I was pulling it away from her and kind of just went off. And after that, that's where it was like, I don't really exactly understand what happened. Everything's all like blurry. I don't know. It's kind of just like I lost control, I think.
Jeffrey's story simply doesn't add up to the evidence. The extent of Melinda's injuries make it clear that this wasn't a case of an accidental shooting or a momentary loss of control. She was stabbed nearly 40 times. That's a brutal act which requires considerable force and intent. It's not something that happens by accident. On top of that, she was shot 3 times. If Jeffrey's story is to be believed, he would have shot her once by accident, then, while out of control, shot her 2 more times, then switched to a knife and stabbed her repeatedly. And this supposed loss of control doesn't account for his actions afterwards. As she died, he sent a fake message to Bruce, cleaned himself up, got his baby, and went out for dinner with the husband of the woman he had just murdered. Jeffrey's defense team would later attempt to argue that this confession was coerced and should be inadmissible in court, but the judge disagreed and ruled that the prosecution could present the confession to the jury. The prosecution had mountains of evidence indicting Jeffrey for Melinda's murder, and they were confident in their ability to secure a guilty verdict and a long sentence. But they never got that opportunity. Exactly 1 year after Melinda's murder, Jeffrey pleaded no contest to the charges brought against him. Now, a no contest plea is not the same as an admission of guilt. It simply means the defendant does not contest the charges. Jeffrey's lawyers argued that he chose this plea to spare Melinda's family the additional pain and suffering of enduring a lengthy and traumatic trial. What a thoughtful guy. This plea came as part of an agreement and resulted in Jeffrey being sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 33 years. This meant that while justice was served in a legal sense, it can't really be considered an admission of responsibility. At Jeffrey's sentencing hearing, Anna shared a few words with the man she had once intended to marry. She tearfully let the court know of all the things he had stolen from her on the day he decided to murder her mother.
My name is Melinda Pleskovic. This is kind of addressed to you. My point is, Jeffrey Scullin should never be allowed to walk free again. The extent of his monstrous actions has forever crippled the lives of everyone he knows. My mother, Melinda, will never be coming back, and that egotistical boy had absolutely no reason or right to rip her away from us. I say boy and not man because a man doesn't harm his loved ones. A man owns his actions and decisions without hiding behind lies. A man supports his family and would do anything for his children. Jeff has done none of these things. Because of his heinous crimes, my brother lost the best mother a child with Down syndrome could possibly have. My father lost his best friend and soulmate. My sister and I no longer have our smart, beautiful, and respectable role model mother to guide us. And my daughter, Aurora, lost her cherished Grammy. The worst part is that someday I will have to sit her down and explain this horrifying nightmare to her. I'll have to find a reason as to why her father chose incarceration and lies instead of his baby girl. And to be honest, I have no idea where to even begin. Jeffrey needs to never have the option to inflict this pain on another human being again, because he most definitely will kill again. He is a manipulator, a pathological liar, a thief, a sociopath, and above all, a sadistic murderer. He shows no remorse and deserves to spend his days away from the innocent. Sincerely, myself, Melinda's daughter, and his ex-fiance.
Hi, I'm Megan Pleskovic, MEGAN, PLEXPOBIC. Your Honor,
Our lives will never be the same because of Jeffrey Scullin. My mom was the face of compassion, love, perseverance, and because of him, she is gone. My mom faced countless numbers of setbacks and negative situations, but she always found a way to get through them and do so in a positive and enthusiastic manner. My mom is a fantastic mother, both loving and tough. As I got older, she quickly turned into my best friend. We would talk about everything under the sun, and I think one of the hardest parts now is not being able to call or hug her after something great or something horrible happens. She taught me to be passionate about things I believe in, to be non-judgmental, and to always stick up for myself and others around me. She was my biggest fan, and I grew up being hers. My last collegiate softball game, she drove 5 hours to support me, and after the game, she was the first person I cried to behind the dugout. She loved all of his kids and her granddaughter with all her heart. As for Jeffrey Scullin, my mom and dad opened their home to him because they're good, loyal people. My mom cared for him as a part of our family and bent over backwards for him, yet he took her life in one of the most violent ways imaginable. I want him to feel the terror and pain that my mom must have experienced, but because of his lack of remorse and sick, twisted mind, I don't think he ever will. Nor do I think he cares about the grief and pain that his own family, his daughter, or the rest of us feel. He is a selfish, sadistic monster that deserves to never again see the light of day. He manipulated my entire family into thinking he could be trusted, although he stole from us and plotted the unthinkable. He took away my dad's wife, my siblings, my mom, and his daughter's Grammy. He took away a life that gave nothing but goodness for reasons that we will probably never know. No punishment will ever bring back the incredible human being that my mom was, but knowing that Jeffrey Scullin will spend the rest of his pathetic life in prison would bring relief to all of us. Thank you.
The loss of Melinda will have a rippling effect on the kids and I forever. Kyle is confused as to why his mom is not around and has become more attached to me. Every time we go out to eat, he spends a lot of time looking out the window to see if his mother is going to show up. My daughters are heartbroken by the loss of their mother, who can never be replaced. Aurora loved Melinda right away, and Grammy was her favorite. Melinda was a natural with kids, just like at her job teaching. Melinda and I had a game plan to downsize and live a little simpler life as the two of us headed towards the next chapter of our lives, towards retirement. That dream has been taken away as replaced by nightmares, a lack of sleep, and having to live life at hyperspeed, just to work on a never-ending to-do list. Over the past year, it has been very therapeutic for me to keep up with our many circles of friends as much as possible. It has helped with the emptiness, loneliness, depression, and the hurt with the loss of them. I can sense the pain, shock, and anger on all their faces when I see them. But when we get together, we make the best of it, have fun, rehashing the memories and stories of them. Now that I've seen the interviews with the detectives and the overwhelming evidence, just continuation of maintaining his innocence doesn't allow our family to heal and receive closure. He never provided a reason why or accepted responsibilities for his actions leading up to the night of Melinda's horrific murder. Jeff also seems to portray himself as a victim in all this when he's the one who has caused all the pain and suffering. I find it really insulting. The week after Melinda was killed, through his time of arrest, he calmly carried on as if nothing of significance seemed to have happened. He even wanted us to put apps on our cell phones so he knew where we all were. I find that a bit scary. I'm aware of a couple situations in his past involving him in firearms. Between these situations and Melinda's seemingly planned murder, I truly believe Jeff would kill again and ruin innocent people's lives like ours. I'm asking the court for justice and a verdict that reflects the unending pain and suffering he has caused my family and all the people who knew and loved her dearly. Thank you, John.
Jeff declined to make a statement to the court. By pleading no contest, he maintained his right to appeal. To date, there has been no record of any appeal filed on his behalf. There are countless victims in this story. There is Kyle, who cannot fully express the depth of what losing his mother means to him. Bruce, who is haunted by the memory of finding his beloved wife covered in blood. Megan, who lost her soccer coach, her confidant, and her best friend. And Anna, who must live with the unbearable truth that the man she brought into her family's life committed this unthinkable crime. And there's Anna's little baby, who in one night lost both a loving grandmother and a questionable father. Despite the pain and trauma of losing Melinda, the family has chosen to honour her memory by continuing her legacy of kindness and generosity. Melinda's spirit lives on through the Melinda Pleskovic Memorial Scholarship, which helps support students in her name. They also launched the #It'sOnMel movement, which encourages others to spread love and kindness daily, just like Melinda did.